The board will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Sanier. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Thank you. Alderwoman Boyd.
Present.
Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Present.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Sanier. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Keys. 11 present. You have quorum.
A quorum being present, we will be led in an opening reflection by poet and chair of the Poet Laureate Task Force, M.K. Siddiq.
Good morning. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you, President Green, for offering this opportunity. As stated, I'm a poet. I'm also one of the things that occurred to me while doing some research with my colleague, J.B. Kwan of the Webster University, was about the lives of Black artists in St. Louis. And so doing some historical research, I came across this phrase. It was Jubilee. It was a Jubilee Corps or something like that, right? Now, there are Jubilee singers and people like that, but the way that this particular phrase was used was to speak deplorably about a group of artists who were Black in St. Louis who were doing something celebratory. And I thought about the word Jubilee, and I'm like, wow, what do they really mean? And I don't know how many of you know about this. I'm pretty sure there's plenty of folks in here who know way more about this than I do. But back in 1865, right, Civil War concludes or in the midst. And as we come to this end, the 18th governor of Missouri offers these remarks on January 11th. And he says, "Forever be this day celebrated by our people. Let us teach our children on the annual recurrence of the 11th day of January to meet around the altar of liberty and renew their thankfulness for our deliverance, and in the historic contemplation of our redemption, renew the songs of our liberty." And he was referring to, and he would go on to say, that through all coming this day, be celebrated in the manner indicated by John Adams, celebrating the 4th of July, by bonfires, ringing of bells, firing of cannons, and waving of flags. And what he was referring to is he was calling it Missouri's Day of Jubilee, which was the end of slavery. At no point in my history did I hear about January 11th being our Juneteenth in the state of Missouri. In no day in my history had I ever heard about us celebrating that day as though it were the 4th of July. And the way that he framed it was not just that African Americans who were enslaved were free, but that Missouri was free. As a matter of fact, he spent more time talking about the freedom of white people from slavery, not because they were enslaved, but because of the nature of work in our society. He spent more time reflecting on that than on the freedom of enslaved Africans. And so in this moment, what I'm thinking about is, how do we celebrate freedom? Do we sometimes have to mask the freedom of Africans in a majority or paint it over in whiteness just so that it could be socially acceptable? In this moment of pulling back from DEI and things of that nature, why do we find ourselves needing to hide behind whiteness in order to celebrate something that makes us all free? If the 18th governor of Missouri back in 1865 can recognize the power that slavery had over everyone and can see how we should all rejoice in the moment and ensure that we celebrate this moment of freedom every January 11th in Missouri. Why can't we figure out how we can all be free right now, unapologetically, and yet all of us be free at the same time? So I just wanted to offer that reflection. It was something that came to me in my research, and I'm very much so moved by this notion because I never knew that Jubilee existed in Missouri.
We will dispense with line item 4. Any introduction of honored guests? Any introduction of honored guests? Alderman from the 5th.
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, it is indeed my honor. Up in the balcony we have the gentleman who will be down on the floor as long as he votes for himself, the new 5th Ward Alderman, running unopposed, Mr. Matt Devote. Matt, please stand up and show everybody that you're not completely insane. Thank you.
Any further introduction of honored guests? Alderwoman from the 10th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. If MK is still here, he's one of my honored guests because I'm his proud alder lady too. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your words. Always on time. I'm trying to get myself together to ask for a moment of silence for a young man with one of the biggest hearts I've ever met in my life. Whitfield Montgomery Jr., affectionately called Lil Pooh in the neighborhood. I called him Big Pooh. Well, he started off Lil Pooh, but as he grew, and when I mean grew and grew, but also he growed in spirit and heart and mind and service. He had a way with people that cannot be taught, cannot be bought. And so that's why he was so successful to me, in my eyes, in everything that he did. I called him my Big Pooh because at this point, he was about this high on me. He was always there. He always showed up in support and his correction, right? Because he followed, he tracked, he understood, even when people around him tried to make him, which sad, tried to make him feel like he didn't understand. Pooh, we could look at each other. I'm like, I know you understand, Big Pooh, Lil Pooh. To Shanice, sweetheart, we are standing for you, with you, and the children. To his sisters, our very own Sheriff, his brother, Miss Brenda, you raised them. In our communities, when grandmothers raise their grandkids like that, it is an example that's set for the entire neighborhood and the entire community. We love you as a family, as a community, as a neighborhood. And even now, I believe my words shared will have somebody that maybe didn't even know Lil Pooh, didn't even know Whitfield Montgomery Jr. You can get to know him now. There's efforts that he was working on and that he was working with, and people down here that he was working with, that if you want to honor true community service, you can still lend in. You can still tap in. So, Madam President, again, I'm humbly asking for a moment of silence for Whitfield Montgomery Jr. Lil Pooh, we love you.
Before we take a moment of silence, Alderman for the 14th, were you also planning to speak to Whitfield? I'm going to recognize him, and then we'll take our moment of silence. Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. First I want to echo everything that the Alderman from the Power 10 said. If you knew Whitfield, which a lot of people in the hood called him Lil Pooh, but like the Alderwoman said, there was nothing little about him. he ended up outgrowing his dad. It was like, you really the big poo out of the poos. But if you knew Whitfield, you knew he was just he was like a gentle giant. He reminds me of the green beans commercial where it's always that big giant, but you know, he was so sweet. He was a goofball. He always wanted to you know, make people smile. And I remember when I actually first met him down in the neighborhood, we started off on opposite sides of the political spectrum. Either it was because I was against, at the time, Senator Nasheed, or standing out, handing out literature, for somebody else that he was supporting. And I remember there's somebody in the neighborhood called Squirrel. And Squirrel and him walked up, and Squirrel's like, this is a little young cat that's out here with somebody else. And Whitfield, you know, even though he was short at the time and I was shorter, we had to have been in our early middle school days. But he was very involved, politically involved with in politics at the times with the Hubbard family and Senator Nasheed at the time. But he walked up to me, he reached his arm out, his hand out, and it was like a bear paw compared to my little hand. And he was like, glad you're out here, but you're going to lose today. And he walked off, and I was like, big little giant something. But, you know, over time, I've had the opportunity to gain a friendship with him. And like Alderwoman said from the 10th, he just really cared. He really cared about his community. He cared about the city. He cared about his friends and family. And I just want to send love also out to his wife, to his kids, to his father, his grandmother, to all his Vashonanites. I know they are breaking right now as well, to the sheriff, his brother, as well as he ended up kind of creating two other brothers in the process at Vashon, Mark Porter and also Javante Nelson. And he'll be missed, and his legacy will continue to carry on. And it was something I think that was very unexpected. I know at the time him and Javante was just on the phone the night before as he had watched Tuesday kind of what happened at the board, and was so excited to see kind of some unity that had happened. And then we all got the news that next morning. But his legacy doesn't stop. His heart, his goofiness, I know he's all looking down right now, just smiling at us and probably saying something silly, but in continuation of what the Alderwoman from the 10th said, I would just also ask for a moment of silence for Whitfield Montgomery, a.k.a. LaPoo.
Alderman from the 3rd, are you also?
Thank you, Madam
I
President.
will recognize you.
Thank you. I too just want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues from the 10th and 14th Ward. I have known Whitfield for probably as long as I've been an alderman now, and he always came with his full heart and a great sense of humor. And even when times were tough, you could always count on him for a good hug or a laugh. And it was just the kindest spirit. And he will definitely be missed, and want to also extend my condolences to his family, his brother, his parents, his grandparents, etc., and wife and kids. It's never easy, to have these losses in life, and especially when someone is so young that's taken from us, it can be very hard to handle. And so want to make sure that we're lifting them up in our thoughts and hearts as well, and remembering him with the greatest of kindness and love as well. Thank you.
With that, if we could please stand and bow our heads for a moment of silence for Whitfield Montgomery. A further introduction of honored guests, Alderwoman from the 10th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I do have one more that I definitely don't want to miss, and that is, as my honored guest today, is our very own clerk, Sharita Rogers. If you don't know, we are all wearing red today for American Heart Month in honoring the legacy of her sister, and through her spirit and service down here, we would say yes to anything for you, Clerk Rogers. But I also want to make sure that my colleagues and everyone knows as hard as she works down here, she's about to have some hard fun for her birthday. So happy birthday, sis. We love you and we thank you and we wish you nothing but the best.
Alderwoman from the 11th.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. So February is National Heart Health Month. And I was thinking about my brother Melvin. Melvin died on September 9th, 2009 from a heart attack. He had not reached, that far into his mid-50s that, this was an event that took place. And so I want to remember all of those people, young and old. You don't have to be old to have a heart attack and to die or to have heart issues. And so my honored guests are all people who are living with, struggling with, who've lost a loved one to heart disease or heart attacks. Thank you.
Any further introduction of honored guests? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Stepping in the gap of my sister from the 7th Ward. Hopefully she's not on Zoom and I'm not taking it away from her, but I want to give a huge happy birthday shout out since we keeping the birthdays going to somebody who actually I met probably back in 2013 when she was cutting her teeth in politics and helped knock doors for her. And since then, she's continued to be engaged in her community. She's continued to be engaged at this board. She is probably the reason that the fabulous woman from the 7th Ward keep her head on a swivel. And she know that I mean that with love, but I would ask the board to wish Chelsea Murda a happy birthday.
A further introduction of honored guests. In honor of Wear Red Day, I would also like to have as my honored guest today, Rachel D'Souza, my new sister-in-law, who many of you know about, 11 years ago now, had 13 years ago now, had a massive heart attack days after giving birth to a child, and has been a tireless advocate for heart health since then. Having only been in her early 30s when she suffered a heart attack. So want to thank Rachel for all of her work and advocacy around heart health, and so thankful that she is with us today. Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the approval of the minutes from Tuesday. The minutes are not completed yet, so we will do both minutes on Tuesday. Report of city officials.
Report of city officials can be found in A, B, C, and D of the agenda and has been placed in the Google Drive for your review. Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment to the Cherokee Street Community Improvement District: Adria Nicole Webb, Jill Abuzzi, Justin Harris, Sarah Fisher, Christian Dennis, Brogan Drissel, and Harrison Lindsay. I respectfully request your approval of this appointment. Sincerely, Tashara O. Jones, Mayor.
Alderwoman from the 8th, you are recognized on Mayor Jones' appointments to the Cherokee Street Community Improvement District.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we approve the appointments to the Cherokee Street Community Improvement District. I want to recognize the Alderwoman from the 7th, in which the majority of this district resides. I have a tiny little sliver, but now that she's entered the chamber, Madam President, I'd like to pass the mic to the Alderwoman from the 7th.
Right. Alderwoman from the 7th, you are recognized on Mayor Jones' appointments to the Cherokee Street Community Improvement District.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This is something we do on a regular basis where we re-elect their officers. They have a very public process where there's actually a quarterly community meeting where food and drinks are provided, and each person who would like to have an official position gives a speech, and they have a voting process. I was there to witness all of this, and I am in full support of these nominations moving forward.
Would you like to make a motion to approve Mayor Jones' appointments to the Cherokee Street Community Improvement District?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to move the Mayor Jones appointments to the Cherokee Improvement District.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 8th, that we approve Mayor Jones' appointments to the Cherokee Street Community Improvement District. Apologies. There was a motion on the table from Alderwoman from the 8th.
Madam President, I would like to remove my motion.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Do you want to go ahead and remake that motion?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to approve the mayor's appointments to the Cherokee Improvement District.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 3rd, that we approve Mayor Jones' appointment to the Cherokee Street Community Improvement District. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment to the Baden Market Central Special Business District: the appointment of Tamara Key, the appointment of Dominique Avant, the appointment of Kimberly Jones, the appointment of Melanie Fair, the appointment of Tiana Broadway, and the appointment of Teresa Myers. I respectfully request your approval of these appointments. Sincerely, Tashara O. Jones, Mayor.
Alderwoman from the 12th, are you handling this? Is that why you're at the mic?
Not.
Okay, just
So
double checking.
Wait a minute, but it is mostly in my ward, so I'm going to oppose anything except for being sent to committee because I don't know this people.
Okay. Alderwoman from the 13th, you are recognized on Mayor Jones' appointments to the Baden Market Center Special Business District.
Yes, Madam President, and I ask for support to submit the following individuals for appointment for Baden Market Central Business District and ask that it be moved to a committee.
Thank you.
Do you have a preference on committee, Alderwoman?
It could come to the Health Committee. I don't have a problem with it.
Okay. Is there a second on that?
Second.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we send Mayor Jones' appointments to the Baden Market Center Special Business District to the Health and Human Development Committee. Is there any discussion? Alderman from the 3rd.
Thank you, Madam President. Typically, these types of appointments would either go to HUDs, TNC, or Budget and Public Employees. This really typically would not be a matter of public health.
Alderman
It
from
doesn't
the...
make a difference. It doesn't make a difference one way or the other. It can go to that committee.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
And typically, they wouldn't even go to committee, okay, because it's just in Baden. And the reason I don't have a problem with it going to health, because it's mostly my ward, and the rest of it is the Alderwoman from the 13th. But if you really insist, I don't have that problem. But this is a little hiccup that we have coming from room 200, okay? So if you really wanted to do, I don't think she cares, but I also don't mind if she does it.
Alderwoman from the 13th, it may be more appropriate to send it to the HUDs committee where other similar appointments have gone, if you would be willing to withdraw your motion and send it to the HUDs committee instead.
I withdraw my motion. I have no problem with it.
Okay. Alderman from the 14th, can you withdraw your second? And Alderwoman from the 13th, would you like to now make a motion to send it to the HUDs committee?
Yes, would you please send it to the HUDs committee?
Is there a second? It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we send Mayor Jones' appointments to the Baden Market Center Special Business District to the HUDs committee. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Does anyone wish to take any bills or resolutions off any of our informal calendar? Anyone wish to take any bills or resolutions off of any of our informal calendars? Seeing none, first reading of board bills.
We have none.
Reference to committee of board bills.
We have none.
Second reading and report of standing committees.
The following board bill was reported out of the HUDs Committee with the DUPES recommendation. Board Bill 165, sponsored by Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, an ordinance determining that tax increment financing plans established in Exhibit A are making satisfactory progress, except as noted under the proposed time schedule for completion of projects herein. The following board bills were reported out of Budget and Employees Committee with the due pass recommendation. Board Bill 173, sponsored by Alderwoman Spencer, an ordinance to regulate employer and employee working relationships between the City of St. Louis and all employees under the classified service, including the compensation plan, terms and conditions of employment, benefits, leaves of absence, authorization for a deferred compensation plan, repealing ordinance number 71686, allocating certain other employees to a grade with rate, and including an emergency clause. The provisions of the section contained in this ordinance shall be effective with the start of the first pay period following approval by the mayor. Board Bill 174, as amended in committee, sponsored by Alderwoman Boyd, an ordinance relating to the appointment of and salaries of certain employees in the Recorder's Office pursuant to Section 82.610 of the revised Statute of Missouri by repealing ordinance number 71174, allocating certain other employees to a grade with rate, containing an emergency clause. The provision of the section contained in this ordinance shall be effective with the start of the first pay period following approval by the mayor. Board Bill 175, sponsored by Alderwoman Schweitzer, and an ordinance relating to the position classification and salaries of the employees in the Treasurer's Office, repealing ordinance number 71690 and enacting in lieu thereof certain new sections relating to the same subject matter containing an emergency clause. The provisions of the section contained in this ordinance shall be effective with the start of the first pay period following approval of the mayor. Board Bill 176, sponsored by Alderwoman Schweitzer, an ordinance relating to the appointment of and salaries of certain employees in the Collective Revenues Office pursuant to Section 82.610 revised statutes of Missouri by repealing ordinance number 71685, allocating certain other employees to a grade with rate, including an emergency clause. The provision of the section contained in this ordinance shall be effective with the start of the first pay period following approval by the mayor. Board Bill 177, sponsored by Alderwoman Schweitzer, an ordinance relating to the position classification salaries under the employees in the parking division, repealing ordinance number 71689 and acting in lieu thereof, containing new sections relating to the same subject matter containing the emergency clause. The provisions of the section contained in this ordinance shall be effective with the start of the first pay period following approval of the mayor. Board Bill 178, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge, an ordinance relating to the employment of and salaries of certain employees in the Sheriff's Office pursuant to Section 57.530 revised statutes of Missouri by repealing ordinance number 71691, allocating certain other employees to a grade with rate, including an emergency clause. The provisions of the section contained in this ordinance shall be effective with the start of the first pay period following approval of the mayor. Board Bill 179, sponsored by Alderwoman Keys, an ordinance to regulate employer and employee working relationships between the City of St. Louis and all employees under the Circuit Attorney's Office, including a compensation plan, terms and conditions of employment, benefits, leaves of absence, authorization for a deferred compensation plan, repealing ordinance number 71905, allocating certain other employees to a grade with rate, including an emergency clause and an effective date and attached pay plan cost estimate. Board Bill 180, sponsored by Alderwoman Boyd, an ordinance to regulate employer and employee working relationships between the City of St. Louis and all employees under the Medical Examiner's Office, including a compensation plan, terms and conditions of employment, benefits, leaves of absence, authorization for a deferred compensation plan, repealing ordinance number 71746, allocating certain other employees to a grade with rate, including an emergency clause. The provisions of the section contained in this ordinance shall be effective with the start of the first pay period following approval by the mayor. Board Bill 182, as amended in committee, sponsored by Alderwoman Velazquez, an ordinance relating to the appointment of the salaries of certain employees of the St. Louis Board of Election Commissioners pursuant to revised statutes of Missouri 115.045 and 115.049, revised statutes of Missouri by repealing ordinance number 71702 and ordinance number 71887, allocating other employees to a grade with rate, including an emergency clause. The provisions of the section contained in this ordinance shall be effective with the start of the first pay period after approval by the mayor. The following board bill was reported out of Legislation and Rules Committee with the due pass recommendation. Board Bill 162, as amended in, 162 Committee Sub, sponsored by Alderwoman Velazquez and Alderman Balmer. An ordinance amending Articles 7, 8, 10 and 17 of the Charter of the City of St. Louis, Section 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 of Ordinance Number 49318, codified in Section 5.14.08 through 5.14.20 of the Revised Code of the City of St. Louis, 2020, annotated to create a Department of City Administration to be directed and overseen by a city administrator, who shall be the chief administrative officer of the city, responsible for administration of the city's affairs, placed under the authority and management of the Department of the City Administration and city administrator, except as otherwise specified, provided in the chapter of the City Revised Code of the City of St. Louis, 2020, annotated, subject to the provisions of the ordinance contained an emergency clause. That's the extent of second reading. Report of standing committee.
Alderman from the 4th, you are recognized on the suspension of the rules for the purposes of moving Board Bills 165, 173, 174 as amended in committee, 175, 176, 177, 178, 179, 180, and 182 as amended in committee to the perfection consent calendar.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we suspend the rules to move the aforementioned bills to the perfection consent calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 10th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of moving Bills 165, 173, 174 as amended in committee, 175, 176, 177, 178, 179, 180, and 180 as amended in committee to the perfection consent calendar. Alderwoman from the 12th.
If you would remove Board Bill 165, you guys know I'm not a TIF person at all. Okay, so could you put that on the perfection calendar, please?
You want that on the regular perfection?
That is correct.
Okay. What I will do, Alderwoman, is since the motion is already on the table to move perfection consent, we'll move them all there and then that to perfection. It has been moved by the Alderwoman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Aye. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone.
That was aye.
Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderman Ballmer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velazquez. Aye. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Aye. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. Thank you.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
14 aye votes and 1 voted present.
By your vote, you sustain the motion. From the Alderman from the 4th, Madam Clerk, if you could please place Board Bills 173 through 182 at the end of the perfection consent calendar and place 165 on the regular perfection calendar.
So noted.
Report of special committees.
We have none.
Board Bills for perfection consent.
Board Bill 88 as amended in committee, sponsored by Alderwoman Boyd, an ordinance approving a redevelopment plan dated May 28, 2024 for the 1100 Veronica Avenue area in the city of St. Louis. Board Bill 138, sponsored by Alderwoman Tyus, an ordinance authorizing and directing the mayor and the comptroller of the city of St. Louis to execute upon receipt and in consideration of the sum of $1 and other good and valuable consideration, a quitclaim deed to remise, release, and forever quitclaim unto Carol Wade, certain city-owned property located in City Block 3714, known as numbered as 4606 St. Louis Avenue in the city of St. Louis, 63115, containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 160, sponsored by Alderwoman Boyd, an ordinance pertaining to the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act 1996 as amended and regulations promulgated thereunder, amending ordinance number 68109 as amended by ordinance number 71102 by designating a privacy officer and security officer for the Department of Health, the city of St. Louis. Board Bill 167, sponsored by Alderwoman Boyd, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Enforcement authorizing the Department of Health to accept a local public agency accreditation assistant grant award up to $239,890 from the Missouri Department of Health and Human Services for the purpose of investing in efforts and activities pursuant to public health reaccreditation, appropriating such funds to the Department of Health, authorizing the expenditure of such funds to fulfill the obligations of said grant to the extent such funds are received, authorizing contracts and other documents to expend such funds to the extent received, containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 145, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge. An ordinance authorizing execution of a lease agreement between the City of St. Louis, Missouri and SCF Fleeting LLC for 1,600 linear feet of mooring in the New North Riverfront for the purpose of barge fleeting under certain terms and conditions for a period of 10 years with 3 mutual options to extend for 5 additional years as set forth in the lease agreement attached hereto as Exhibit A, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 146, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge, an ordinance authorizing the execution of a lease agreement between the City of St. Louis, Missouri and Continental Cement Company, LLC. Board Bill 170, as amended in committee, sponsored by Alderwoman Velazquez, Alderman Narayan, Alderman Aldridge, Alderwoman Keys, Alderman Oldenburg, and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. An ordinance pertaining to the fines and codes enforced for vacant and deteriorated property, including increased fines for unsecured buildings and unlawful demolition, directing monies from these fines to the city's existing vacant building initiative fund, expanding the use of this fund, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 171, as amended in committee, sponsored by Alderwoman Boyd, Alderman Narayan, Alderman Aldridge, Alderman Oldenburg, Alderwoman Velazquez, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, and Alderwoman Keys. An ordinance to reconcile collection methods with state statute by modifying existing ordinances to more effectively and timely recover amounts owed to the city for fines, improvement costs, special tax bills containing an effective date and a severability clause. Board Bill 173, sponsored by Alderwoman Spencer, an ordinance to regulate employer and employee working relationships between the City of St. Louis and all employees under the classified service, including the compensation plan, terms and conditions of employment, benefits, leaves of absence, authorization for a deferred compensation plan, repealing ordinance number 71686, allocating certain other employees to a grade with rate, including an emergency clause. Provisions of the section contained in this ordinance shall be effective with the start of the first pay period following approval by the mayor. Board Bill 174, as amended in committee, sponsored by Alderwoman Boyd, an ordinance relating to the appointment of and salaries of certain employees in the Recorder's Office pursuant to Section 82610 of the revised statutes of State of Missouri by repealing ordinance number 71174, allocating certain other employees to a grade with rate, containing an emergency clause. Provisions of the section contained in this ordinance shall be effective with the start of the first pay period following approval by the mayor. Board Bill 175, sponsored by Alderwoman Schweitzer, an ordinance relating to the position classification and salaries of the employees in the Treasurer's Office, repealing ordinance number 71690, enacting in lieu thereof certain new sections relating to the same subject matter containing an emergency clause. The provisions of the sections contained in this ordinance shall be effective with the start of the first pay period following approval by the mayor. Board Bill 176, sponsored by Alderwoman Schweitzer, an ordinance relating to the appointment of and salaries of certain employees of the Collective Revenue's Office pursuant to Section 82.610 revised statutes of Missouri by repealing ordinance number 71685, allocating certain other employees of a grade with rate, including an emergency clause. The provision of the section contained in this ordinance shall be effective with the start of first pay period, followed by approval by the mayor. Board Bill 177, 177, sponsored by Alderwoman Schweitzer, an ordinance relating to the position classification and salaries of the employees in the Parking Division, repealing ordinance number 71689, and enacting in lieu thereof certain new sections relating to the same subject matter containing emergency clauses. Provisions of the section contained in this ordinance shall be effective with the start of the first pay period following approval by the mayor. Board Bill 178, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge, An ordinance relating to the appointment of and salaries of certain employees in the Sheriff's Office pursuant to Section 57.530 Revised Statutes of Missouri by repealing ordinance number 71691, allocating certain other employees with a grade with rate, including an emergency clause. The provisions of the section contained in this ordinance shall be effective with the start of the first pay period following approval by the mayor. Board Bill 179, sponsored by Alderwoman Keys, an ordinance to regulate employer and employee working relationships between the City of St. Louis and all employees under the Circuit Attorney's Office, including the compensation plan, terms and conditions of employment, benefits, leaves of absence, authorization for a deferred compensation plan, repealing ordinance number 71905, allocating certain other employees to a grade with rate, including an emergency clause effective date and attached a pay plan cost estimate. Board Bill 180, sponsored by Alderwoman Boyd, an ordinance to regulate employer and employee working relationships between the City of St. Louis and all employees under the Medical Examiner's Office, including the compensation plan, terms and conditions of employment, benefits, leaves of absence, authorization for the deferred compensation plan, repealing ordinance number 71746, allocating certain other employees to a grade with rate, including an emergency clause. The provisions of the section contained in this ordinance shall be effective with the start of the first pay period following approval by the mayor. Board Bill 182, as amended in committee, sponsored by Alderwoman Velazquez, an ordinance relating to the appointment of and salaries of certain employees of the St. Louis Board of Election Commissioners pursuant to 11504511049 Revised Statutes of Missouri by repealing ordinance number 71702 and ordinance number 71887, allocating certain other employees with a grade with rate, including an emergency clause. The provisions of the section contained in this ordinance shall be effective with the start of the first pay period following approval by the mayor. That is the extent of perfection consent calendar.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion to adopt the board bills for the perfection consent calendar.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we adopt the board bills for perfection consent calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 4th, that we adopt the board bills for the perfection consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Board bills for perfection.
Board Bill 14, committee sub as amended. In committee, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge, President Green, and Alderwoman Velazquez. An ordinance which amends certain sections of Chapter 8 of the St. Louis Revised Code to streamline mobile food vendor operations, to amend distant requirements and operating hours in which mobile food vendors may operate, to establish a mobile food court pilot program with certain radius within the City of St. Louis, establishing regulations for designated city park days for mobile food vending, and amending vending districts.
Alderman from the 14th, you're recognized on the motion to perfect Board Bill 14 committee substitute as amended in committee.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Board Bill 14, committee substitute as...
Make a motion to perfect.
I'd like to make a motion to perfect.
Is there a second? It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we perfect Board Bill number 14 substitute as amended in committee. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you. Board Bill number 14, committee substitute as amended in committee, is legislation that I filed back in April of 2023. Actually, I filed it last session as well, but really tried to put a lot of energy working on it this session. We have held several committee hearings on it. The purpose of this bill is to try to streamline and cut red tape around food trucks. As I've had the opportunity to meet with the Food Truck Association, they had explained to me, and some of the previous ordinance, it really hinders them once they get their licenses to be able to operate as a food truck. They're only really able to operate in certain sections of the city, which doesn't allow them to really utilize their license after getting it. So over the last year, we have met, and I've sat down with GSL, who was able to really bring us all together, as well as Downtown Neighborhood Association, Central West End, the Food Truck Association, the Mayor's Office, the Parks Department, and also the Restaurant Association, which typically the Restaurant Association, we didn't agree in Jeff City, but they support this piece of legislation. there's a lot of good stuff, I think, in this iteration of the committee substitute as amended, where we are reducing the boundaries where food trucks can be able to operate when it comes to brick and mortar. I understand the concern that we do not want to make sure a food truck is right outside of brick and mortar. In the old legislation, before amending it, they couldn't be right outside of a brick and mortar, and what we did is reduce the the radius to 100 feet. We also made it where they only can vend in commercial districts F through L. We created a food truck vending market right outside of, it would start at 1200 Market Street to about 1301 Market Street. And we also worked with our Parks Department to ensure that food trucks can be able to, with a portal, be able to vend in some of the parks. There's been a lot of, I would say, robust discussion around this piece of legislation. I know some of the members had thought maybe this was rush again. This has been something that has been worked on for a very long time. But I do understand some of the concerns that brick and mortars have, as well as some of the concerns my colleagues may have with if a food truck would be outside of brick and mortar. I just want to go on record again that food trucks would not be able to be outside of a brick and mortar. I know there's been conversation about having a food truck, and the competition of a brick and mortar and food truck has really been a pinning food trucks against brick and mortars. And I appreciate the comments from the Alderwoman from the 10th Ward and the committee hearing talking about how we get to a place of where food trucks and brick and mortars work together, because the reality is a lot of food trucks, they start off as food trucks before they go to brick and mortars, and a lot of people of color who have food trucks, it's an easy way for them to start as a food truck and then eventually get to a brick and mortar. But, you know, we are at the end of session, and I do hear a lot of concerns from different neighborhood groups and alders, and I don't think nothing will be perfect. I think this is a good iteration of the legislation from the last year of where it started from. But, you know, the board does come back in 2 months, and I don't think, you know, things need to be rushed. I will make sure I convene conversations with my colleagues to try to make sure that some of those concerns continue to be addressed, as well as concerns from neighborhood associations. I will say, as I put this bill on hold, we will never find a perfect situation. We do need to address the red tape that our food trucks operate in, and I want to thank the Alderwoman from the 6th Ward for also working with me on this legislation, as well as Ms. Hayden from the President's office to try to figure out how do we cut red tape around food trucks. But again, I'm not trying to rush this. Want to make sure that some of these concerns are addressed. So with that, Madam President, I would ask if we could put Board Bill 14, committee substitute as amended, on the informal calendar.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that.
So noted. Board Bill 96, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge, an ordinance amending Chapter 13.100 of the Revised Code of the City of St. Louis to establish a custodial of records for public governmental bodies, including the Board of Estimate and Apportionment.
Alderman from the 14th, you're recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 96.
I would like to move to perfect Board Bill 96.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we perfect Board Bill 96. Alderman, you may proceed.
1 second. I blame the Alderwoman from the 8th for distracting me. So many board bills. 96, yes. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Board Bill 96 is a board bill that would establish that every department has a custodian of records. Since we've established some new offices, there is a list that is in the registrar's office, but it is not updated. And since we established new offices, some of those offices are not part of the list. And what this will do is when individuals reach out to the city to potentially put in a sunshine. They would know exactly who they need to reach out to, as well as this piece of legislation ensures that all of the documents from ENA is posted so that the public can see those various documents. And with that, I would close for any questions.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, if you could please make sure that I'm still listed as a co-sponsor of 96.
So noted.
Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I would like to just request that I be added as co-sponsor.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that.
So
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Alderman from the 14th, you are recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, I close.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we perfect Board Bill number 96. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Board Bill 122, sponsored by Alderman Ryan and Alderman Aldridge. An ordinance amending Chapter 3.02 of the revised statute of the City of St. Louis to require all boards and commissioners to develop and adopt rules and requiring those rules to be available on the city website, providing for the Roberts Rule of Order to prevail whenever the rules of the city boards and commissioners are silent, and providing for training to be offered to members of the board commissioners to ensure familiarity with the rules, Sunshine Law, and Roberts Rules.
Alderman from the 4th, you are recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 122.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we perfect Board Bill 122.
Second.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we perfect Board Bill 122. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Oftentimes around here we talk about very simple, straightforward, common sense bills. This is exactly that. It's a board bill. It's about 1 page long that the summary basically describes everything it does. It forces all of our boards and commissions to have rules and to follow the Sunshine Law, and they can promulgate their own rules. In the absence of those rules, they will be utilizing Roberts Rules. This just ensures that we have a fair record and that we're complying with the law on all of these boards and commissions. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions and ask for your favorable consideration.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, if the Alderman from the 4th would yield.
The Alderman from the 4th yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 12th.
Yes.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you. So the lawyer in me just can't be quiet about this. So your bill starts out saying an ordinance amending Chapter 3.02 of the Revised Code of St. Louis. We have to amend ordinances. When you try to amend the code itself without the ordinances, what you get is a copulation. Any of you all who want to go look, when you look at the city codes, it will tell you it's a copulation of ordinances. So I just want to point that out to you, that you might want to put that on the formal and go and put in, before you perfect it, the actual ordinance that you are amending.
Alderwoman, I believe if you read the actual bill itself.
So that's not correct right here.
The summary, I'm pulling it up right now.
Okay.
But because I know that this came through, this had been vetted certainly. And I'm pulling up this bill right now.
I have it here also.
So yes, this just, it lists all the commissions and boards, and then changes the, this goes to the rules section for boards and commissions in Chapter 3. So this is overarching.
Referring to. I truly do understand that. If you look at bills that we amend, and what the charter talks about is we have to amend ordinances, not because the revised codes of the city of St. Louis, and I'm looking right at your bill, that is a compilation of whatever, but it is not the law. So we need to amend ordinances. That's the only thing I'm saying.
Sure. And, we have two more meetings left
And I'm
this
just
session,
saying-
so I'm certainly happy to put it on informal and make sure that we get it right.
I just wanted to tell you that, okay? So that
Sure.
I'm not trying to ambush you. I've been telling the alderman from the 14th the same thing, okay?
No, absolutely, and I'm happy to ensure we get it right. It's important that we do,
I agree.
and we certainly have time, and I'm happy to go informal with this and make sure that we are doing it correctly. Madam President, members of the board, I request that we put Board Bill 122 onto the informal calendar.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that.
So noted. Board Bill 155, Committee Sub, sponsored by Alderman, Committee Sub as amended, sponsored by Alderman Orion and Alderman Aldridge. An ordinance amending Section 1, 2, 3, 4 of Ordinance 71094, amending Section 10 of Ordinance Number 70767, and amending Section 11 of Ordinance Number 69427, modified existing and providing provisions pertaining to the prevailing wage and workforce utilization, compliance, administration, and requirement for city public works, contracts, tax increment financing projects, abated projects, and city bonded projects, clarifying remedies for failure to comply with prevailing wages and workforce utilization requirements, setting forth certificate requirements by contractors, and containing a severability clause.
Alderman from the 4th, you are recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 155, Committee Substitute as amended.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we perfect Board Bill number 155, Committee Substitute, as amended.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st, that we perfect Board Bill 155, Committee Substitute as amended. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This board bill is one that's come a long way since it was filed. It didn't gain a lot of traction last session. We had more and more discussion, and I think we've really come to some solid compromises on this board bill between all of the interested stakeholders. If anyone was watching, there was a pretty long and drawn-out Transportation and Commerce Committee meeting a week or so ago, in which, as we were having the committee meeting, there were people actively discussing certain dollar thresholds, certain language regarding apprenticeships, how the nuts and bolts of this should work. And we came to a really solid place, I think, where, like I often say, no one was thrilled with the end result, but everyone was comfortable. And, I was in a room with MOCAN, NAACP, the various labor organizations, myself, Alderman Cohn, we're all there, and everyone came to the table, negotiated in good faith. We ended up with the then committee substitute, knowing that we were going to have to make some changes still for the enforcement mechanism of this. And so this floor substitute really is about cleanup of some legalese, and then knowing that we had to utilize the city councilor's office rather than SLDC on enforcement. And that's something that everyone in the committee knew at the time. So I have, both on the drive and on everyone's desk, an overview here on what changed and when, both with the original bill, the committee substitute, and now what's being added in the floor substitute. And I am happy to answer any questions. I don't want to go over everything because we'd go through all of the definitions, all of the enforcement mechanisms, both on minority workforce development and prevailing wage enforcement, compliance, debarment, workforce utilization, on and on down the line. So at this point, I'm happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, if you could please add me as a co-sponsor.
Oh, yeah.
Alderman from the 4th, you are recognized to close.
Well, so first I would move that adopt the floor substitute.
Okay. It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 4th, that we introduce floor substitute for 155. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you. So now we have properly in front of us the floor substitute, which is the culmination of a lot of work from a lot of people. And I think we really ended up with just a solid piece of legislation here. We've been having these discussions on where this threshold should be and how we ensure that we're protecting all workers in the city, whether they're union workers, whether they're minority contractors, whether they're solo person shops, how we're actually moving the bar forward for every worker in the city. And I think that this bill makes huge steps to do that. And I'm again happy to answer any questions.
Any further discussion on the motion to adopt the floor substitute? You on the motion to adopt the floor substitute or on the bill?
On the floor, on the bill.
Okay. Then with that, it's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderman from the 1st, that we adopt the floor substitute for 155. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman from the 4th, you're now recognized on the motion to perfect Board Bill 155 floor substitute.
I move that we perfect Board Bill 155 floor substitute.
Second.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderman from the 2nd, that we perfect Board Bill 155 floor substitute. Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 1st.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, I would first like to be added as a co-sponsor to Board Bill 155 floor substitute, and also just thank the sponsor and everyone who worked on this. I know there were a lot of different voices at the table here. The thing that I am most excited about this is more information and more teeth around the restitution for workers when they're not paid prevailing wage on projects. This is a really big problem, and we need to make sure that workers do get paid what they're due. Thank you so much.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. To echo some of the comments Alderman from the 1st said, I know there was how at the start of the hearing, MOCAN and a lot of African-American labor groups were not in support of this piece of legislation. They were able to kind of hash it out and come up with a compromise language, which now MOCAN supports. And I think it's important when we're making sure we talk about labor that we're being inclusive and making sure that we represent all of our labor workers, understanding that sometimes our African American labor organizations don't have the same playing field as others. And I also would like to be added as a co-sponsor. Madam President, I also would like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that. Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th, and then I'll go to Alderwoman from the 7th.
I think she was first.
She first?
Oh, yes.
Okay, Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I just wanted to also acknowledge the very spiritful conversation that happened in committee. I had some folks who are seventh warders that were watching and were like, they're on pause, they're on recess, what is happening? And I was very glad to see that you all were able to need to resolve in real time and show in real time that balance that is there. There were some conversations that we had before about particularly minority women business entrepreneurs being mindful of how the original version of the bill, that the number was so low that it would have been more of a burden for them to kind of adhere to that and still be able to get the contracts through and things of that nature. So I'm very happy to see that folks were able to come to the table and reach that medium. And I hope that folks like Yafit and others who are at home can see that we can listen to you and we can balance all of the concerns that are there. And with that, I want to commend you, Alderman, for your work on this, as well as everyone else, Alderman Cohn and everyone else who was involved in those conversations, and request to be added as co-sponsor.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that. Alderwoman from the 12th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. If the Alderman from the 4th would yield.
The Alderman from the 4th yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 12th.
Absolutely.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I promise you, Alderman, I don't have a thing that says you can't amend ordinances, okay? So I just want to make sure, I haven't been following this closely as I can because I read so much. I actually run out of time to read everything. I was contacted by MoCan and some other black contractors because I think there was something maybe last term. Last session or whatever, that it was a board bill about this, and they were up in arms about it. And so, did I hear you say that you actually had a chance to sit down with MoCan? Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay, was it Yafet or Eddie or who?
Yafet and several others.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you all the names. There was 4 or 5 individuals
Right.
in the room.
Okay, and then also, did you talk to any other black contractors or black businessmen?
There were frankly there were black contractors and businessmen both on the labor side, MoCan, non-labor. There was, if you had a chance to look at the committee meeting, I don't know if I've ever seen the Kennedy room have so many individuals in it.
Okay. So I'm more about the contractors because sometimes, I'm talking about the black contractors because sometimes when people work for labor forces, they mimic what majority says, which is not in the best interest of the businesses. So that's why I'm asking more about them, because when you work for somebody, you kind of have to not be able to speak out against them.
Sure, and so we also, additionally, we had the Alderwoman from the 10th just reminded me, we did have essentially a listening session before in committee just to make sure that everyone had a chance to come before the committee, and we made substantial changes after that.
Okay, because I know oftentimes we have implemented, because I've been down here for so long, and I've heard from them many times we implement ordinances or we pass ordinances, and I think the Alderwoman from the 7th may have said it, they're a hardship on smaller minority-owned firms, and so it's really like restricting them from participating in things. I haven't seen this, I haven't followed it closely, but I also haven't heard from any of them, most of them who have my phone number. So that means that I'm going to vote for this, but if it's not a good vote, I will hear from it this weekend, and I'll be back next weekend with my tail tucked behind me saying these are the things that they told me were not true. But right now I haven't heard from anybody who said I'm upset with it or anything like that, so I will be supporting it.
Alderwoman, if it makes you feel any more comfortable, I can tell you towards the end of the committee hearing, it was a long committee hearing, so I'll save you going through the whole thing. But at the end of it, I pulled a couple of quotes, and one was from Ms. Elamine, who said, and I quote, "This is a bill that affords for opportunities for all companies." That's a direct quote from her after we finished the compromise committee substitute.
Like I said, I'm voting for it, but I've been known to vote for stuff, and then I get home, or I'm not even at home, and people are like, okay, this is a problem. How come you did that? But I tell them all the time, if you have problems, you let me know. I try to read almost everything I can, as you know. Everything, I'll try to read it. But some things just got past me, so this was one of them, because I expected if there were problems, I would have heard from some people, because there's a multifaceted of people that I know. So I'm going to support this, and if you've been able to do a compromise, thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 4th, you're recognized to close when you're ready.
The Alderman from the 3rd just pointed out something that I want to be very clear about. There's a different threshold for where investigations in between prevailing wage enforcement come in, and then where the MWBE threshold is. So the $400,000 threshold that was referenced several times in the summary is different than the prevailing wage threshold, and that was all something that was agreed upon in the committee meeting. But so if you see that $75,000 language still anywhere in the bill, that is why. That's the prevailing wage portion that no one had an issue with. Everyone at the table agreed that prevailing wage was something that that needed to be paid out. So with that, I will just say that, again, this was a board bill that took a lot of time from a lot of people. I also want to thank Adolphus Pruitt from the NAACP for coming together at the table and getting groups of people who don't always see eye to eye on the issues, but wanted to ensure that we were pushing forward for all working people. And just in close, I want to quote what he had to say about the board bill in committee. As we closed on it, he was the last individual to speak on it. He said, and I quote, "All I want to say is that today was a reflection on what occurred back in the 60s during the civil rights movement. And that is when advocacy organizations and labor were able to come together and fight for a common cause. And the fact that we were able to revisit that today was delightful." And with that, I'll ask for your favorable consideration.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderman from the 2nd, that we perfect Board Bill 155 floor substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Board Bill 169, as submitted in committee, sponsored by Alderman Browning, Alderman Ryan, Alderman Aldridge, Alderwoman Keys, Alderman Oldenburg, Alderwoman Velazquez, and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. An ordinance pertaining to administrative fees and effective code enforcement for vacant and deteriorated property containing definitions and a severability clause.
Alderman from the 9th, you're recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 169 as amended in committee.
Thank you. I move that we perfect Board Bill 169 as amended in committee.
Second. Been moved by the Alderman from the 9th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st, that we perfect Board Bill 169 as amended in committee. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you. So 169 is part of a trio of bills, 169, 170, and 171, aimed at holding accountable properties and their owners where they are vacant, derelict, or otherwise contributing negatively to their environment as per our codes. Right now, the administrative fees for a code violation, whether that's forestry related or building related, is $25. $25 does not get anyone's attention. It does not compel compliance. It is the cost of doing business for somebody who is not looking to take care of their property, and the effect becomes really negative on the neighborhood that is around that vacant property. So these bills came about as a result of listening to voters. Across the city, people voted on the November ballot to pass Prop V, which updated the city charter to allow stiffer penalties against absentee landlords. And we have this problem in our city where over 109,000 total properties in the city of St. Louis, almost 23% are considered vacant or abandoned. So that's why myself and Alderwoman Velazquez and Alderwoman Boyd came together to put together this bill package so that we could help address this. What 169 does is it increases administrative fees. The first violation is moved up to $100. The second violation is $250. And then there was no subsequent violation after that. And so we're adding a third violation that goes up to $500. The fees collected from this will go directly to the impacted tenants fund. So if you are a tenant whose landlord is neglecting your property, has code violations, it's not safe for you, this is meant to, one, compel compliance, just fix it up, and those fines can be waived by the building division if it's fixed up. Or the goal here is if they're going to pay the fine, that fine then goes into helping tenants who were affected by code violations that rendered their living space uninhabitable. So I think this is a good all-around bill. It's supported by the Vacancy Collaborative, and Peter Hoffman and Legal Services of Eastern Missouri were a very helpful guiding hand as we tried to write these bills. And proud to say that too that we have the mayor's office's support on this as well as the president's office. So happy to take any questions, but this is a great day for St. Louis. And the last thing I'll say is just that this is about addressing repeat offenders and deterring chronic code violators. So that my colleagues will join us in updating these fines so that we can really fight back against this problem in St. Louis.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. My inquiry is actually for Alderwoman Velasquez.
Sorry,
I would like to make an inquiry of Alderwoman Velasquez.
Alderwoman from the 6th, would you yield to questioning from Alderwoman from the 7th? Alderwoman from the 7th, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. As was previously mentioned, obviously these were a slate of bills. I think the folks in our city are really concerned about vacancy, and I've gotten a fair amount of questions about the initiatives. And even though it was the Alderman from the 9th bill that was on there, I know that the Alderman from the 6th actually led Proposition V and was a leadership role in all of these bills. And so I wanted to just direct my inquiry to you to put some information on record that I know was also discussed in committee. Could you talk about with the changing of the fines and fees and with some of these things where those funds are now going to be directed?
Sure. I just want to preface that you were correct in that Board Bills 171, 170, which I sponsored, 171, which Alderman Boyd sponsored, and 169, which Alderman Browning sponsored, were a part of a trio of bills, a package of bills addressing vacancy. We did this very purposefully because, as Alderman Browning mentioned, we have one of the highest rates of vacant buildings in the country at around 23%, which is why voters overwhelmingly, up to nearly 80%, voted for Proposition V. We also felt that, as the three of us, it was important to show that folks from North City, Mid City, and South City were all doing something to address vacancy. So with that, because they were a package of bills, they're sort of interrelated and interdependent in some ways. So Alderman Browning's bill, or Board Bill 169, as amended in committee, those fees still go to the vacant tenants fund, or the impacted tenants fund. That does not change. What is changing in 169 is the costs, the fines. And as Alderman Browning mentioned, the fines are larger for repeat offenders, which is what we're trying to do. Proposition V was all about addressing vacant and deteriorated buildings for non-occupied homeowners, or non-owner occupied buildings. And this is an extension of that. So this is, as we've been talking about, the stick. There are lots of carrots, but this is really to address that. And so these fees, nothing changes in where these fees go on 169. What does change is the amount that is fined.
Thank you. And if I'm a property owner and I'm a smaller property owner and I'm concerned that these fees may have, more of a negative impact on me, and I'm not, obviously I have an idea of who this is trying to target, but could you talk about some of the discretion in the bill in a way that it is hopefully designed so that it is more folks who are own a lot of property and are being very negligent, as opposed to a smaller property owner that might be keep up?
So just so I can clarify your question. Your question, is there a difference in how the bill is written if they're a small property owner versus not a small property owner?
Well, just more about the impacts and the goals of the bills, to who this is looking to target, the types of folks we're trying to hold accountable, and also the type of folks who we're trying to provide understanding that they may just having an economically tough time given our market right now.
Right. So these bills are for non-owner occupied vacant or deteriorated properties, which means that they are not intended, they do not impact what I think you're trying to say is struggling homeowners who may not have the money to fix the repairs on their home. And that's, again, what Proposition V outlined, that it was non-owner, it's very wordy, blame the lawyers, non-owner occupied properties. Again, because these are a trio of bills, what Alderman Boyd's bill does is aligns our code with state code and gives the city the ability to use special tax bills and put liens on properties. Again, not the people, but the properties, again, of these non-owner occupied properties, so we can better enforce these, again, flagrant repeat offenders we're trying to go after.
Thank you so much. That really is my inquiry. I just thought that was very important to put on record, just the thoughtfulness of it, and also to highlight that our extension of Proposition V. And again, just wanted to make sure it was clear, the non-owner occupied piece. I think that's incredibly important, because I did get some reach out from people who I think were confused on who it applies to. So I really wanted to provide clarity of that. And with that, I'd like to be added as co-sponsor.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that, and please add me as a co-sponsor as well. Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I rise in support of these. I think that, frankly, this trio of bills is something that we should have done long ago. I think that each and every one of us probably has buildings in our wards that have fallen in disrepair, sometimes by out-of-state owners or out-of-state LLCs, and these bills will give us a meaningful enforcement mechanism, because for too long, just working through the housing courts and taking your fine at the end of the day and just keeping the ball up in the air indefinitely has been a way for people to do business in the city, and they're doing it at the detriment to the people who live here, and this should put an end to that. And I'm certainly in favor of this, and I would encourage you all to be too. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Will the Alderwoman from the 6th yield for questions?
The Alderwoman from the 6th yield to questioning from the Alderman from the 14th.
Yes.
Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Alderwoman. First, I do want to stand and rise in support of this. I know you were the lead sponsor of the charter change when it came to Proposition V, and we had our charter Muppet team out, yourself, Alderman from the 9th, and the President's office to try to get some of these, passed. It seems like one didn't make it, but others did, but that's okay. But I think these slew of bills are important. And so can you talk about, and I think you touched on it, at least in the one that we're talking about now, there will be an additional increase in fines and fees, and those fines and fees would go to the Impact Attendance Fund legislation that we passed this session, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And we're trying to stay germane as possible, but I know it's hard to talk about one because they all are the same. The other piece of legislation that talks about vacant buildings would then create a new fund. Can you kind of talk about?
Sure. So I look forward to bringing back our Charter Commission or Charter Change Roadshow next session. But that is not germane to this conversation. So Board Bill 170, as amended in committee, has a little bit different of a setup. So I think it was back in 2010, an ordinance established the Vacant Building Initiative Fund, and that is what some fines currently go to. What Board Bill 170 does is it adds 2 new fines, and of the 2 new fines, half of those funds will go to the Vacant Building Initiative Fund, and then half of those fines will go to CDA to be used as grants for vacant or blight-related grants for community to improve what they're doing. Now, aside from those two new fines that are in 170, it doesn't touch any other fines that are already directed to go to the Impacted Tenants Fund.
Okay. And, I'm hopeful and optimistic. We all have these grand ideas, and we are trying to pass legislation to move our city forward. And I know, especially for, there's probably not one part of the ward that has vacancy. But we do know that there are some parts of the city that are just flooded with vacancy, some that are residential and some that's actually owned by the city. But I know there were some amendments to push back the effective date. What was the thought process of that? And will the building division have the capacity to do this new enforcement when it comes to potential new fines for one of the pieces of legislation?
Sure, because these 3 bills are interrelated or interdependent, if you will. Board Bill 170 had a fiscal note, which advocated for the addition of 4 new employees, 2 in the city councilor's office and 2 in the building division, specifically because, yes, you can increase new fees technically without having to hire anybody, but the question that I think one of the questions that we keep coming back to here at the board is how do we enforce these new laws? And so enforcement would be much better if we had additional staff to do that. I would also say that last year there was an ad hoc pilot program filled with people from legal services, SLC, the building division, that attempted to get some of these outdated fines. So the city tallied that were more, that they had guessed, or they had calculated there were about $21.6 million in uncollected fines related to vacancy. So board up costs, forestry costs, all those things. So that 21, so if we think about there's 21.6 million that's not being collected. If an ad hoc group who, no, it was nobody's direct job to do that, collected 250,000 of that back when they were just doing it in their spare time. I think that if we had 4 new staffers that were focused solely, 2 between the city councilor's office and 2 between the building division, because we added 171, which is the special tax bills, then we'd be able to enforce those. And I think generate the income by the very nature of collecting it. We had conversations with both or communications with both the building division and the city councilor's office. One of those, part of the conversation with the building division was that they needed more time than what we put in the original bill. So we agreed on a date to push it back to September 1st because they thought that they could hire within that time for these positions. And we really want to bolster their budget request by having that fiscal note in there and saying, you know, this is, if they can again collect 250,000 of this $20+ million when everybody's just doing it whenever they have time, how much could we collect if we actually had 4 dedicated people to doing that collection and enforcement? And you need both the building division and you need the city councilor's office for those, you know, special tax bills and those other kind of mechanisms that the problem properties unit.
And since I guess this will add more positions, pushing it back to September would been I guess also smart for our budget process to make sure that as we're starting budget conversations and when we come back, the board budget committee will be meeting. ENA will, you know, departments already getting their TOs and staffing, that it's for sure that these positions will be allocated to make sure that the process of the legislation actually can go through is also probably part of that effective date.
Yes, and there's proof of concept, right? Because they collected $250,000 of this $20+ million owed to the city, and there's an additional $2.7 million in back taxes on these. I think it's close to 14,000, you know, vacant properties that we're looking at. So certainly, if we had people who were focused on enforcing and collecting it, we get a return on our investment, not to, you know.
Good day for the city.
Huh?
Never mind. And lastly, could you talk a little bit about there's some changes of how the fines can now be like, is it a lien or? So
that's in Alderwoman Boyd's bill. That's in Board Bill 171. And that bill is related really to, it's aligning our code here in the city with the state's code on special tax bills. So it will allow the city to create special tax bills on these properties and also liens on these properties. Again, and one reason why this is important is that it pulls it out of the municipal court sort of system of enforcing it, but it also is focused on the property and not the person. So the lien comes against the property. But what that also does is it really puts the owner into, it forces them into a decision-making funnel quicker, because they really have to either decide, am I going to not pay this tax lien, or am I not going to pay my tax bill, now that we're allowed to add those collection fees onto that tax bill. And obviously, there are repercussions that we already exist for not paying your taxes.
And at the committee, there was also, I'm curious of the police involvement. Even though this is a building division, the police was there speaking, if I'm not mistaken, like in favor of it. What, I guess?
Sure. So the Problem Properties Unit is a collaboration, I believe. I'm sorry if I missed one of the people involved. It's the building division, the city councilor's office, and also I think Sergeant McLaughlin, a retired Sergeant McLaughlin, who testified at Public Safety, is part of the Problem Properties Unit. So the amendment that that Sergeant McLaughlin recommended, as well as the administration, was that we put back in we do not strike what was already in the code, that there is a potential 90 days jail time, I believe. I'd have to look at the bill, but that was important for them in enforcement. And, you know, I think our job as legislators is to look to the experts for answers. I'm not there on the streets trying to board up buildings nor compel property owners to do that. So if Sergeant McLaughlin tells me that this is the way he can better enforce it, I'm not going to argue with him, and so that's why we amended that.
Gotcha. Okay. All my questions, I do appreciate, like I said, your leadership and the trio of trying to, as you notice, there's yourself, I think, from mid St. Louis City, and also, I guess, the Alderman from the 9th Mid, but also including Alderwoman Boyd from North Side to try to make this, I think, a regional conversation. So I'm in support of it, co-sponsor, and I just want to say thank you for your leadership on it.
Thank you, Alderman.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, I'd like to respond to the Alderman from the 4th was saying what a good bill it was and why we didn't do it before. Because so just a little history, we put the vote out maybe 2 or 3 times to raise the increase for bills, for the fines on the building division and other things, and each time the people voted no. So you couldn't do this because they kept voting no. I would also like to say that I will be watching very closely how they administer this and what actually happens, because a lot of times when we pass these kind of bills, then when you go back, if you're trying to get information, because the reporting is very important, what you find is they don't want to give you the reports of what's going on, and when I pull it, it is whatever little bit we were supposed to be doing, it gets put to a different part of the city, not even addressing how much pain and sadness it is for all the vacant buildings in the north part of the city. So I will be watching this very closely, because we just had something in the newspaper and on the news a few months ago about one of the things we did was Prop NS. And Prop NS is a mess, because we have building inspectors going around not only with the Prop NS properties, but with private properties saying that they have done work on it, and they then had a contracting company that they were part of. And then he quit and went away. But to me, we failed in having proper oversight on that. How does somebody do that? Who lets them do that? I have been inquired about several buildings in my ward that were LRA properties that I requested to be torn down and demolished, and all of a sudden they said a different program with this administration about how to demolish LRA properties. Before you could turn the request into the building division, and if Mr. Oswald, who was the building commissioner at that time, determined, and the people that worked under him, then we could get them tore down. It is, I asked for a report on the demolition of buildings in our city. In the last 3 years, it has significantly decreased, especially as it comes to LRA properties. And that leaves these properties that I never asked for anything unless the roof is gone and 2 or 3 of the walls are gone. My husband used to be the vice president of Landmark, so we are old building huggers. We've been rehabbing since 1979, so I do not ask for buildings that don't need to be demolished, and it's to my dismay that they haven't been. Okay, all of a sudden, everything I asked for, they ran out and said, oh, we've put some money into that, but the buildings still look a mess. So besides taxing people, we are going to have to address who is saying, yes, this building is going to sit up here, because what you're telling the people in the community is that you have no right to have a nice community. Because I'm not saying tear down buildings that have ability of being rehabbed, but I'm saying that when you force vacant buildings to stay in people's neighborhoods year after year after year, and the people all around them are cutting their grass, and we had the opportunity to go and fixing their properties up. We had the opportunity to go through my ward with the fire department and the police department and Donald Williams, because we're closing several streets, and we were doing safety inspections. And the policeman said to me, Alderwoman, your ward is mostly all cut, except for who are these lots and buildings right here? They were all LRA properties that they have refused to take care of. And that's because now they got a new process. So even if, what do you do with the LRA properties, I guess, is the question that I have. And if the alderman from the, what are you, the 7th? No, 9th. If the 9th would yield, I would like to ask him, how do we deal with LRA properties? I know we're going to put taxes on the private properties. Madam President? Madam President?
Alderman from the 9th, will you yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 12th?
Yes.
Alderwoman from the 12th, you may proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Alderman, I'm trying to figure out if at any place there's in there that we can address the LRA properties. And I know legislation doesn't cover everything. And I know we do have a lot of public-owned buildings that they don't address them, and that small amount was ridiculous. We also, I want to just tell you this, because this is what I've been researching. They also let them lower their taxes. So if their property value goes down, they can go to the Tax Equalization Board and actually lower their taxes while they're not doing anything with their property. So I think this is good, but I was just wondering if there any part of LRA that you might address in this, because they don't pay any taxes.
Yes, thank you. Good question. I would say that is a separate area, but what I will say is that as of 2024, the city reported that there was approximately 14,000 properties that had outstanding code violations, totaling over $21.6 million in fees and fines that were related to vacancy, including cost for demolition, board up, forestry services, and more. So when we don't have accountability here, the city's not getting the money back to be able to take care of these things. So my hope is that by having these increased fines and fees, by having a better collection method of being able to say, hey, we put these on here, you're not paying them, we're going to add them to a special tax bill, and we're going to get it out from under that negligent or that property owner that's just, as you say, hurting the community and kind of making everyone else is cutting their grass, everyone else is doing what they're supposed to be doing. That gives the city also more money to be able to then go and handle its own properties. So I get it. You know, the LRA is the owner of a lot of properties that are not in great shape. A lot of them are vacant at this point.
No, they need to be torn down.
Torn down a lot of buildings, which is why I always talk about the need to create more housing in our city, especially on the north side. But I totally agree that every single ward has buildings that are bringing it down and hurting the community, but especially North City neighborhoods. So I think that is something I'd like to work on with you and make sure that we're figuring out how to address LRA properties, but I do think that these bills give us more resources to do that.
And so, and I understand, I knew you couldn't address it because they don't pay any taxes, but we have commissioners that are appointed by the mayor, the comptroller, then the taxing districts, and to me, they're doing a disservice to because SLDC is running it, to let them have properties sitting up for this long, 2, 3, 4, 5 years that have had fires. You're not going to put $400,000 in a little house on a street in the Ville where the roof is burned down and 3 walls are gone. You're just not going to do that. I've been rehabbing since 1979. So what are you leaving those properties up there for? Okay, I wish we had a comprehensive demolition program under this mayor. That's one of the things I had suggested. We need a comprehensive demolition, figure out, go in and clean this stuff up, because that will encourage people if they see what's going on. So is the long run, so what my question, so as we put these special taxes on them, is that looking toward taking the buildings away from them because the taxes become so much that they get sold in sheriff's sales, or is it that we're going to send the city out? Because I'm kind of scared since I've seen that whole report about the inspector saying that he put money into something and then he had a company. Is the end goal to then have the city go out and do the repairs? I do know I have part of Baden, and they actually work with legal services to fix houses up and sell them to homeowners. So I just kind of wanted to know what the end goal or target was.
Yeah, I think, I can't speak to Prop NS and how that's been administered. Obviously, there are some problems there, and those need to be addressed. But what I will say is that, again, these are resources that we can then apply. I hope I'm not out of order here when saying that the other bills that are packaged in here are aimed at, illegal demolitions. They're aimed at making sure people have proper boarding up. Because right now, again, a lot of these fines are so low that someone's like, well, I'm not going to bother boarding up, and then it gets worse and worse. So the goal here is to compel people to either comply, fix it up, and if it's not be able to fix it up, force them to either move on, give it to someone else who will do something with it, or demolish the property so that it's safe. Because you're right, if there's a building that was on fire and it's half collapsed,
Right.
you can't really board that up, can you?
Correct.
But they need to either demolish it or they need to move it to someone who will.
Correct.
And that's the goal here, is just compliance. At the end of the day, this is really going to be hitting the repeat offenders who are really making a problem for their neighborhoods. So we're trying to just create either compliance or that special tax bill where it allows the city to then take it and then we can either put it in a part of our demolition program or we can flip it to somebody who will do something with it.
And so if these people, because some of the people will not do it, they will not comply, will we continue? I guess we can go above 500 now. Is there a limit we will do? And then will we do it? Why don't we just wait for the movie theaters? Okay. Will we then do it again the next year or the next year? Or how will we handle that? Because there are some people that play a game. And the other thing they will do is they will transfer the property. And what I don't like that the building division has been doing in previous years, if they sell the property, they start the process all over. And what I have suggested they do is that if we are in the process of finding them, that we file that with the deed so that anybody who buys it would know that it is in the process of being fined, so we don't have to start all over.
Yeah.
So you address that?
That's the beauty of these bills is that it puts it on the property. And so, yes, there's continuing, it continues to compel them.
Right.
And make it so that they're either going to fix it up. Also, it shortens the period. So we're really looking at when we put it on the special tax bill, they're going to need to pay it or they're going to end up losing the property.
Okay.
And again, we all know that there are owners in Colorado and New Mexico and all sorts of things. They bought the property in a sheriff's sale for real cheap. They think they're going to speculate on or just sit on it. And all it does is it just continues to hurt the communities. So this really is aimed at compliance.
So by the lien, then that puts notice, and that lien will be filed in the record of deeds. Am I to understand that, not just the lien?
I think so, yes.
Okay, because if you don't do that, you don't have notice. But once you do that, then they do have notice. And it's been my argument with the building division. We've put liens before, but we just didn't file them. So then if I sell it to you because I'm under pressure, now you're saying, well, I didn't know anything about that. Now you're starting that process right over again. So if we haven't put that in, I would suggest we come back and put that they have to file it in the recorders of deeds, because then it will be noticed and then nobody can say they bought property and they didn't know what was going on. Thank you very much. I appreciate you answering my questions.
Of course.
I have no further questions.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, Alderman from the 9th, you are recognized to close.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the good questions from my colleagues. And again, I just want to offer my extreme gratitude to Alderwoman Velasquez and Alderman Boyd. I think it really says something when alders from North, South, and Central City are coming together, really proving that this is a citywide issue. But as has been noted by my colleagues, there are some wards that deal with it much more than others. So at the end of the day, this is about protecting our communities. This is about holding negligent owners accountable and really just improving the quality of our city overall. I really appreciate all the people who have spoken up and supported this. And with that, I close and ask for your favorable consideration.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 9th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st, that we perfect Board Bill number 169 as amended in committee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Board Bill 165, sponsored by Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. An ordinance determining that the tax increment financing plans listed in Exhibit A are making satisfactory progress, except noted under the proposed time schedule for completion of projects herein.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 165.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we perfect Board Bill 165.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th, that we perfect Board Bill 165. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
I renew my motion.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, I am just going to ask for a roll call so that I can vote no, because TIFs are not anything that's progressing good. I actually have something that I just pulled down called Reimagining the Team 4 Plan with an Eye Toward Community Collaboration and Private Capital. It's a Washington University's law review, and it really talks and speaks to tips that we hand out and how it was used only in the central quarter and downtown and places to really attack North St. Louis and attack the St. Louis public schools. So my thing is not to attack any alderman down here. I have been voting against TIFs, even my own, forever, and there's no progression I see until we look at a different way to do development that does not take them away from our public schools. That is not in the best interest of our community. With that, I would just ask for a roll call, please.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized to close.
Thank you. I renew my motion.
Been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th, that we perfect Board Bill 165. There's been a request for roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Eleven aye votes and 4 no votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 10th to perfect Board Bill 165.
That's the extent of board bills for perfection.
Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Voting on the prevailing side, I would like to reconsider Board Bill 96.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 12th, that we can reconsider Board Bill 96. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge.
Aye.
President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Cone. 15 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 14th to reconsider Board Bill number 96. Madam Clerk, please place that at the end of the regular perfection calendar.
So noted.
Alderwoman from the, both motions to reconsider, and then we'll do the bills. Does that work? So Alderwoman from the 6th, you are now recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. Being on the prevailing side, I move to reconsider Board Bill 182 as committee.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 6th, seconded by the Alderman from the 3rd, that we reconsider Board Bill 182 as amended in committee. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge.
Aye.
President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
15 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 6th to reconsider consider 180 as amended in committee. Madam Clerk, if you could please put that at the end of the regular perfection calendar.
So noted. Board Bill 96, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge. If I can find it. Thank you. Board Bill 96, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge, an ordinance amending Chapter 13.100 of the Revised Code of the City of St. Louis to establish a custodial records of public governmental bodies, including Board of Estimate and Apportionment.
Alderman from the 14th, you are recognized on Board Bill 96.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I request that we put Board Bill 96 on the informal.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that.
So noted. Board Bill 182, as amended in committee by Alderwoman Velazquez.
Got to adopt this. Got to adopt the floor substitute then. Right?
I'm sorry. That's on the second reading. Thank you. An ordinance relating to the 182 as amended in committee sponsored by Alderwoman Velazquez. An ordinance relating to the appointment of and salaries of certain employees of the St. Louis Board of Election Commissioners pursuant to 115.045, 115.049 Revised Statutes of Missouri by repealing ordinance number 71702 and ordinance number 71887 allocating certain other employees with a grade with rate, including an emergency clause. The provisions of the section contained in this ordinance shall be effective with the start of the first pay period after approval by the mayor. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 6th, you are recognized on the perfection of 182 as amended in.
Thank you, Madam President. I move to perfect Board Bill 182 as amended in committee.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 6th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we perfect Board Bill 182 as amended in committee. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. Now I move to adopt floor substitute for Board Bill 182. It is, I think, being passed around everybody's desk, and it's also in the drive.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 6th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st, that we adopt the floor substitute for Board Bill 182 as amended in committee. Is there any discussion on the adoption of the floor substitute? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Alderwoman from the 6th, you are now recognized on Board Bill 180 floor substitute.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a brief explanation of why we're doing a floor substitute. Obviously, this is one of the pay bills that we are very happy to see at the city. This bill is specifically related to the Board of Elections. We passed it out of the Budget Committee this week. What did change and why we had to do a floor substitute is the fiscal note had to be adjusted, and it was more complex than in one spot. The fiscal note had to be updated to include the numbers for this year, and it has been looked over well in detail by our financial analyst. So I'm confident that this is an accurate, these are accurate numbers, and that is the only change that is in this bill.
Would you like to make a motion to perfect Board Bill 82 floor substitute?
Yes, Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to adopt or to perfect Board Bill 182 floor substitute.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 6th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 11th, that we perfect Board Bill 80 floor substitute. Is there any discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, if the Alderwoman from the 6th would yield.
The Alderwoman from the 6th yields to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 12th.
Yes.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Madam President, members of the board, Alderwoman, thank you for the floor substitute.
Alderwoman from the 12th, could you please speak
I'm
into
sorry.
the microphone? I cannot hear you.
That's usually not my problem, okay, that people can't hear me. So, all right, I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Can you tell me, because I don't see, I'm trying to find the highlight or whatever, what exactly did we change with in the fiscal note?
So I believe that it did not take into account, in the fiscal note that was originally submitted, did not take into account the increase for this year. So that was changed. I think that was the big key change.
And can you tell me what page that would be on?
So that would be on page, I think it was year 1 of the current financial impacts, which would be on page 3 of the fiscal note. I'm sorry, that would have been that would be, for this particular thing, it would be the last page, page 4.
So of the board bill number 182 for substitute fiscal note, it would be on the 3rd page.
The 4th page, the very last page, make it easy, the
4th
very
page.
last.
And
So when it was originally submitted did not include the, basically the calculations weren't correct for the first year.
so year 1, which is the first, okay, that number changed, that 24,138.
Right, that was the big change. And we wanted to review all of it thoroughly, and again, just to make sure that we dotted our number I's and T's, that it was correct. But this is the same, what is being, why it is specific to the Board of Elections. It is the same standard 3% pay increase that all members, all departments are getting, but we just didn't have the accurate numbers in the.
Normally, when we do a change, we highlight, underline something so that we can find it. You can pretty fast. So that's why I'm asking the questions. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 6th, you're recognized to close.
With that, I renew my motion to perfect Board Bill 182 floor substitute.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 6th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 11th, that we perfect Board Bill 180 floor substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
That's the extent of board bills for perfection.
Report of engrossment.
Board Bill 112, 152, 154, 156, 164, 168, 150, 158, 159, and Board Bill 161.
Third reading and final passage of board bills consent.
Board Bills 112, 152, 154, 156, 164, and Board Bill 168.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion to adopt the third reading and final passage of board bills on the consent calendar. Alderman from the 14th, you are recognized on the motion to adopt the third reading and final passage of board bills on the consent calendar.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move to adopt the third reading and final passage of the consent calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt the third and final passage of board bills on the consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Browning. 15 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman or Alderman from the 14th to third read and finally pass the aforementioned bills. Third reading and final passage of board bills.
Board Bill 150, sponsored by Alderwoman Spencer, an ordinance approving the dissolution of the Cherokee Limp Special Business District by repealing ordinance number 63957.
Alderwoman from the 8th, you are recognized on the third reading and final passage of board bill 150.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we third read finally pass Board Bill 150.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 8th, seconded by the Alderman from the 5th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 150. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you all. Thank you, Madam President. Board Bill 150 is a sad day, the dissolution of a taxing district. We've had some discussion down here already regarding this subject matter, and I'm happy to take questions from my colleagues.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion?
Roll call.
Seeing none, Alderwoman from the 8th, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I would respectfully request your favorable consideration on the third reading and final passage of Board Bill 150.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 8th, seconded by the Alderman from the 5th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 150. There's been a request for roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Orion. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Aye votes, and 3 voted present.
By your vote, you've sustained the motion from the Alderwoman from the 8th to third read, finally pass Bill 150.
I'm sorry, Alderman Cone, was your vote present? Thank you. Board Bill 158, sponsored by Alderwoman Schweitzer, an ordinance approving a removal of certain parcels under real property from the boundaries of the Carondelet Commons CID as provided for in Section 67.1441 Revised Statutes of Missouri.
Alderwoman from the 1st, you're recognized on the third reading and final passage of Board Bill 158.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move to third read and finally pass Board Bill 158.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderman from the 2nd, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 158. Alderwoman, you may.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This bill is to remove a parcel of undeveloped land from the boundaries of the Carondelet Commons Community Improvement District. This removal of this parcel is being done because there is a offer to purchase that parcel, and the new owner does not wish to participate in the SID. There is no plan, and there never was a plan by the current owner to develop that parcel, so this wouldn't have figured much into the abilities of the SID to do what they need to do. So this is just to remove that parcel from the boundaries. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, the board. I just rise today just to provide some clarity. I think there's some confusion from folks on the legislation. So we did kind of talk about this in committee, but again, I always will ask questions that constituents raise on the floor. Would the Alderwoman from the 1st be willing to yield to an inquiry?
Would the Alderwoman from the 1st yield to questioning from the Alderwoman?
Yes.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you. Alderwoman Schweitzer, could you just, I think there is some confusion of folks because Green Street is tied and there's currently a lot of conversation around them and litigation between the city and them. Could you just clarify what your bill does as far as the role of Green Street is concerned?
Thank you for that question. Green Street was the developer of this site and is still very involved in the site. This is selling this bill particularly removes the parcel called Lot D from the SID boundaries. So, any parcel could be sold by an owner of property, and then they could choose to stay in the SID or not at that time. In this case, the prospective owner does not wish to stay in the SID, so that's what this bill does, is remove them from the boundaries.
Thank you. And once, could you speak to the process once someone is removed from SID, what that means as far as their eligibility for taxes and just that process for residents who may not be familiar with what that means?
That wouldn't have, if they could apply for a tax abatement or a TIF at a separate time, but that doesn't have much to do with the SID. It's just the SID, the Community Improvement District, is the board and boundaries that facilitates the site and their payments, if they have any payments to make to pay for bonds or anything else under a TIF. So this just removes them from that group, from that district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 1st, you are recognized to close.
Thank you. I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderman from the 2nd, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 158. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanier. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
15 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 1st to third read and finally pass Board Bill 158.
Board Bill 159, sponsored by Alderwoman Schweitzer, an ordinance authorizing the execution of an amendment to the redevelopment agreement between the City of St. Louis, Missouri and Carondelet Broadway TIF, Inc.
Alderwoman from the 1st, you are recognized on the third reading and final passage of Board Bill 159.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. I move to third read and finally pass Board Bill 159.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderman from the 2nd, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 159. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. This bill, similar to the last bill that's in front of us, is regarding the potential sale of Lot D within the Carondelet Broadway TIF area. The purpose of this amendment is to remove this parcel, Lot D, from that encumbrance. Because this parcel was never to be developed by the current owners, it is not seen as something that would have contributed much. It never has to any payment of the bonds or debt of the property. So this is just to help facilitate that sale and make the property as string-free as possible when the purchaser is able to buy it. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, Alderwoman from the 1st, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderman from the 2nd, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 159. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Aye. Alderman Oldenburg. Aye. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanier. Alderwoman Spencer. Aye. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge. 15 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 1st to third read and finally pass Board Bill 159.
Board Bill 161, sponsored by Alderwoman Spencer, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment authorizing the City of St. Louis, Missouri to issue its taxable industrial development revenue bonds, Series 2025, in the amount of not to exceed $41 million.
Alderwoman from the 8th, you are recognized on the third reading and final passage of Board Bill 161.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 161.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 8th, seconded by the Alderman from the 5th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 161. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. Board Bill 161 is an ordinance that provides a tax incentive to Anheuser-Busch to expand their current productions in the city of St. Louis. While the summary here includes a principal amount not to exceed $41 million, that's really the amount of taxable industrial development revenue bonds that the city would issue. What that will do is essentially allow the city to purchase the equipment they need for this production expansion. The total value, and bypass sort of abate, if you will, the sales tax on those manufacturing components. And what the actual resulting tax incentive value is closer to, I think, $1.5 million. So I wanted a point of clarity there because while the amount here is quite different than what the resulting incentive packages. We, as we all know, Anheuser-Busch is no longer headquartered here in the city of St. Louis. They still have a very impactful and important footprint on our community. And we were, the city of St. Louis, in competition with other manufacturing facilities in the Anheuser-Busch footprint to land this expanded capacity here. And so in order to sort of fill the gap and make it make sense to be competitive on that landscape, we were able to put the package together. With that, I will take questions from my colleagues.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 3rd.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to also piggyback off of what my colleague from the 8th Ward was just mentioning. It's important to kind of put some context in here. When companies are looking to do these types of projects, they have to evaluate sites and all of their portfolio. And so, capital projects in particular get prioritized based off of what they're able to do. And, these types of incentives are important in terms of those proposals. They get sent up in their, real estate departments and elsewhere. And so, this is not the first time we've done something like this. The former alderman from the 9th Ward, who's sitting behind me, had a similar bill that came before us in a previous session with respect to an expansion that they performed that created a new product line and added employees. And so I rise in support of this bill as well.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, Alderwoman from the 8th, you are recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. And with that, I ask for your favorable consideration of my colleagues on Board Bill 160.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 8th, seconded by the Alderman from the 5th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 161. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Thank you. Alderman Browning. 13 aye votes and 2 voted present.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 8th to third read and finally pass Board Bill 1.
That's the extent of third reading and final passage of board bills.
Reported, the finally passed and signed by the President.
Board Bill 112, 152, 154, 156, 164, 168, 150, 158, 159, and Board Bill 161.
All other business being suspended, the President shall in open session affix her signature hereto to the end that these may become law. First reading resolutions in reference to committee. Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, I seek to suspend the rules to introduce resolution number 53.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 12th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Resolution 250. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Orion. Alderman Valmer. Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg. Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
14 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 12th. Please add Resolution 253 to the first reading of resolution.
So noted.
First reading resolutions in reference to committee.
Resolution 253 sponsored by Alderwoman Tyus, honoring James Sidney Smith.
Alderwoman from the 12th, you are recognized on Resolution 253.
Madam President, members of the board, I seek unanimous consent.
Hear no objection, you may proceed.
Madam President, members of the board, I'd ask that this resolution be read, and it's kind of long, but this gentleman worked for 30 years in the street department, and so I wanted to honor him by having it read into the record.
Madam Clerk, if you could please read Resolution 253 into the record.
Resolution 253 honoring James Sidney Smith. Whereas James Sidney Smith was born September 18, 1929 in Georgetown, South Carolina to Arthur and Florrie Smith, the youngest of 3 siblings. And whereas James began his education in Georgetown public school system, and he continued his studies after his family relocated to Philadelphia. On May 15, 1951, he answered the call to serve his country. Enlisting in the U.S. Army, he proudly served until May 15, 1953, where he was honorably discharged. And whereas on January 25, 1954, James married the love of his life, Betty Ruth Smith. Together they built a home filled with faith, love, and unwavering devotion to his family. As a husband and a father, James led by example, teaching his children the importance of keeping Christ first, treating others with kindness and respect, and cherishing family bonds. He and Betty shared a love for travel, creating beautiful memories along the way. James had a passion for gardening and often tended to his plants with the same patience and care he showed to those around him. Whereas in 1961, James embarked on a long and dedicated career with the City of St. Louis Street Department, where he diligently rose to the position of supervisor. After 30 years of service, he retired in 1991. Even in retirement, his work ethic never wavered and continued working as an independent contractor with Mr. J's Asphalt Company and Scott Truman Company. Whereas always eager to lend a hand, James was known for his generosity, offering assistance to friends, family, and community whenever needed. James embraced his faith in Christ at an early age. He was a devoted member of the New Jerusalem Missionary Baptist Church. Whereas his dedication to his church was evident in many roles he humbly, faithfully fulfilled: chairman of the deacon board, superintendent of Sunday school department, Sunday school teacher, usher board instructor for the ushers department within both his churches, and the St. Louis Progressive Missionary District Association. He was a proud member of the New Jerusalem Male Chorus and served as a troop leader in the Boy Scouts. Whereas a man of strong faith and deep conviction, James was one of the founding members of the city-wide Brother Love Brotherhood of Love, a group of men from various churches dedicated to mentoring young men, encouraging them to be faithful in Christ, responsible fathers, compassionate community members. Whereas Monday, January the 27th, God called James home to everlasting peace. He passed peacefully at home, surrounded by his loving family. He was preceded in death by his parents, his beloved sibling Janine, Jerry Smith, his devoted wife and queen of 63 years, Beth Ruth Smith, 3 sons, James, Maurice, Douglas, and his grandson, Maurice, and great son, Ronald. Whereas James leave behind the legacy of love and faith by his cherished son, Lonnie, daughters Paula and Monica, and Betty Jean, daughter-in-law Venus, grandchildren Tracy, Tony, Tamika, Damian, Latasha, Latrice, and Nina, Nia, 14 great-grandchildren, 3 great-grandchildren, and a host of nieces, nephews, cousins, dear friends, and his beloved German Shepherd Bentley, and his church family. Whereas James' presence, wisdom, and kindness will be deeply missed by all that knew and loved him. As written in 2 Timothy 4 and 7, I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course, and I have kept the faith. Now he receives his well-earned crown of righteousness. Now therefore be resolved by the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis that we pause in our deliberation to join the sponsor of this resolution in expressing her deepest sympathy to the family of Mr. James Sidney Smith upon his passing. We instruct the clerk of the Honorable Board of Aldermen to prepare a copy, properly inscribed on this resolution to be presented to the family of Mr. James Sidney Smith at a time and place deemed appropriate by the sponsor. Introduced this 7th day of February by the Honorable Sharon Tyus, Alderwoman of the 12th Ward.
Alderwoman from the 12th, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I seek to pass resolution, what is it, 253, and ask also for a moment of silence.
Okay, if we could please stand and bow our heads for a moment of silence.
Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 12th, if you would like to, we didn't have a second on that, so if you would like to repeat your motion to adopt 253.
Resolution 253, and I better get a second from somebody. Okay.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 12th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt Resolution 253. Is there any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 6th.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we pass this resolution in bank.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 6th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we make Resolution 253 in bank. Is there any discussion on the motion to in bank? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 12th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt Resolution 253. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
That's the extent of first reading resolutions and reference to committees.
Second reading resolutions, committee reports from the Legislation and Rules Committee.
Report from the Legislation and Rules Committee, the mayoral appointments to the Missouri History Museum Sub-District.
Alderman from the 5th, you are recognized on Mayor Jones' appointments to the Missouri History Museum Sub-District.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, I'm happy to report that from the meeting we interviewed for hours and hours Mr. Thomas Grady and Gilberto Pinella, and we have come out with the fact that they are well qualified for these positions.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 5th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we approve Mayor Jones' appointments to the Missouri History Museum Sub-District. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
That's the extent of second reading of resolutions, committee report, and adoption.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized in the motion to adopt the courtesy resolution consent calendar.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we adopt the courtesy resolutions consent calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt the courtesy resolution consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. For Resolution 152, I just wanted to, speak on what I called her when I spoke to her. I'll say Brenda Baby, or Miss Brenda Baby. They say when it rains, it pours. And I was talking to the Alderwoman from the 10th and, didn't recognize that when she asked me to be a co-sponsor, was putting one and two together. Then I seen the obituary from who it was for and realized that it was somebody who also is just very beloved and has been beloved in the city of St. Louis. She was a resident of the 14th Ward. I know at some point she worked in the sheriff's office under the previous sheriff and was currently at Employment Connection. Again, just a great soul that and gem to the city, was very dedicated in her community, very active in her neighborhood. And I just want to send my appreciation and love and respect and honor to her and her family as she's gone away, but to her family, to let her know that it's a lot of people, not only at this board, but throughout the city, that appreciate all the work that she's done to continue to make St. Louis a better place. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 11th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I've had a long time connection with Ms. Brenda, as well as her son, who is my shirt man. And so I wear his work literally just about every day. And her activism and participation in the betterment of this city, as well as her respective ward. Her son does the same level of work. Without a title, she served. Without a title, he serves. And I am so appreciative of the man that Chris is, and I know that he has inherited his mother's sense of service from him. And so today, I honor her and I thank her for all that she has done, all that she has put her heart, hands, and mind towards the service of our city and the service of her respective ward and the work of her hands. I appreciate so much. Thank you. I'm sorry. Oh, can we embank that?
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 11th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we make Resolution 50 to embank. Is there any discussion on the motion to embank? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Any further discussion on the courtesy resolution consent calendar? Alderwoman from the 10th.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I would just be remiss if I didn't get up and speak to the family again as well. Alderwoman Keys and I were able to go and share time and space with them this morning before the meeting. Visitation. The services are going on now as we speak. And seeing Maisha and Chris and knowing what that feels like, I just want to continue the love and support we have shared here previously. I know also this morning, Mayor Jones declared it Brenda Simpson Day in the city of St. Louis. If you didn't know her, again, these quiet giants here in the city make the difference, have absolutely made the difference, as Alderwoman Keith said, even without a title. They're always behind the scenes. So I'm going to miss Miss Simpson saying, Mimi, you got this. It was a way that she could say, Mimi got this, that nobody else could say it. And so we, again, honor, respect, uplift, encourage, and will continue to support you, Maisha, Chris, your beautiful wife, your family, everyone attached to Miss Simpson, and honor her legacy through being here for whatever you need. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 11th.
I have a different one. I'm sorry.
Okay. It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt the courtesy resolution consent calendar. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Miscellaneous and unfinished business.
We have none.
Announcements.
Monday, February the 10th, 2025, the Poet Laureate Task Force meeting will be held via webinar at 4 p.m. Tuesday, February the 11th, 2025, HUDs will have a webinar at 8:30 a.m. Full board meeting in the chambers at 10 a.m. And that's the extent of the announcements.
Any further announcements? Alderwoman from the 11th.
Okay, thank you.
Now you're up.
Thank you. Again, Madam President, members of the board. I just wanted to acknowledge the passing of a true gem in our city, former St. Louis Public Schools teacher, Marie Bosley, who passed at age 99. And so I would like to ask for a moment of silence.
We could please stand and bow our heads for a moment of silence.
Thank you.
Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderwoman from the 10th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I want to announce for the public to know that Prop S, if you're not familiar with Prop S, the programs to reduce crime among at-risk youth, which since it's Black History Month, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this was started by our very own Black History down here, a former Alderman Clerk Kennedy. The Prop S RFP is live now. You can go to the website. It doesn't close till March, but it's important that you get that information and get your paperwork in. What I understand about Prop S is that it sees programs that are on the ground, many grassroots programs. This is their opportunity, and we know that when we're dealing with at-risk youth, the people that are closest to the problem are most certainly closest to the solution. So this is a funding opportunity. Again, Prop S, the RFP is live on the website. If you need help connecting to that, please call down here to the Board of Aldermen so that we can make sure you have what you, the information you need.
Any further announcements? Any further announcements?
I forgot one more thing I got excited about. Many of you might not in the public because you can't see the galley all the time, but one of the people that is here all the time is Mr. Milford with the Out Front Media billboards and the engagement, right? And him taking the time out to be here. He's in committee as well. So I want to not only recognize him, but why I want to recognize him in announcements is because right now they have an intentional effort of on their billboards for Black History Month youth that are Black business owners, entrepreneurs in the city of St. Louis. So I want to publicly thank you and your company for that effort here in a time where we are so uncertain about things like that. You all are setting the example here in the city of St. Louis. If you haven't seen their billboards, they have, again, different youth, Black youth in the city that are entrepreneurs. Take a time to engage with those and share them on your social media. Share that Out Front is making that stand and continue to support them, the youth rather, the entrepreneurs in their efforts. Thank you.
Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Really quickly, I would express and ask my colleagues during this month of Black History Month, I want to highlight the Griot Museum, which is located at 2505 St. Avenue. It is one of actually two Black History museums that we have on St. Louis Avenue. It is a Ms. Lois Conley, who many of us know here in the city of St. Louis, has done amazing work to continue to make sure that this museum is going. There's amazing individuals like Percy Green, who has a wax statue in there, and just a lot of history. You know, she allows this place to also be a hub for the St. Louis Place neighborhood to meet. She's running off of, you know, just donations and support from the community. So during this month of Black History and beyond, but especially during this month, if you can go and check out the great history that we have from great individuals in the city of St. Louis at the Griot Museum located at 2505 St. Louis Avenue. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I have a sad announcement to make. Maybe a request of a moment of silence. I have, you know, obviously Black women have some of the lowest infant mortality rates, and I have a family member who, in the process of giving birth, is having a lot of complications and is in a very unstable position right now in the hospital. Sorry. So I just prayers up for her and prayers up for the baby, if it can be, or a moment of silence if it can be there, but also I just, she actually asked me to say something and just to make an acknowledgement that there obviously are a lot of positive things, but obviously the Black community is still really suffering with health equity and health access. And right now, as a lot of my family is at the hospital and is very concerned, just wanted to let her know and let any other folks out there, and particularly Black mothers out there, know that folks do care and we are aware of a lot of the health inequities and the ways that they disproportionately impact our community.
We could please bow our heads for a moment of silence.
Thank you. My second announcement, I know that it's been all over the news and all over the media. The International Institute is having a very difficult time, especially in lieu of a lot of the federal funding. So if anyone is curious about getting directly connected with opportunities to volunteer, opportunities to donate, ways that you want to plug in and be supportive, they are having a very difficult time and expect it to be more difficult as things continue to move forward with this administration. So I just wanted to let folks know who may be watching, if you're concerned and you want to plug in, they are currently working on revamping their volunteer efforts and are really asking for a lot of hands on deck, and also are in specific needs of a lot of materials. So feel welcome to email or call, and always happy to make that connection, but want to put that public ask out there. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 11th.
Thank you again, Madam President, members of the board. So I wanted to kind of tie on to what the Alderwoman of the Power of 10 Ward talked about with young entrepreneurs. And I want to uplift the name of Ariel Biggs. Ariel Biggs is the mother of a young man who owns his own business, so does her daughter. But she has actively helped to produce so many kid entrepreneurs in this city and other cities as well. She and Mr. Eddie Davis have really taken on a wonderful, wonderful mission to produce kid entrepreneurs. And so I'm just so excited anytime I come in contact with Ariel Biggs and the work that she is doing. Not only are they producing all kinds of products, but each of them has produced a book. So she's also producing young authors. Very, very exciting work. Look up Ariel Biggs and give her a little bit of praise on Facebook. Additionally, I just want to remind people that we are living in a time where everything is going up. I'm gonna have to start dealing in the egg trade soon, and so get me a corner, start selling eggs. But everything is so expensive, and the Urban League continues to stand in the gap for food insecurity within our city. Tomorrow, they're having a food drive. If you need food assistance, please get to the Urban League tomorrow. Thank you.
Any further announcements? I do want to make two quick announcements. One, we've had a couple of questions regarding Tuesday. If you have not been looking at the weather forecast, it looks like we may be in, unfortunately, for another winter storm, Tuesday to Wednesday. We are going to monitor it over the weekend. For now, we are still in person on Tuesday. But if it does look like road conditions are going to deteriorate during the time we will be here, we will send out a message by Monday morning to let you know. And then the second thing is, in honor of Wear Red Day, if we could all please gather on the steps at the conclusion of the meeting to get a picture for Wear Red Day. With that, Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion to excuse.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, all members were present.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, I move that we adjourn until Tuesday, February the 11th, 2025, for now in the full board meeting in the Alderman chambers. Thank you.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 3rd, that we adjourn until Tuesday, February 11th, 2025 at 10 a.m. in the Board of Aldermen chambers. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.